Kelsey, while we wait for the rest of the folks to arrive, we're up to 84 right now. We'll probably have a few more. Do you want to talk just for a minute about warp, weave a real piece, so that those who aren't familiar with it get clued in?
Absolutely, yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Kelsey Wiskirkin. I'm Warp's Executive Director, and I just want to thank you all for being here today. I see a lot of familiar Warp faces on the screen and quite a few people who I've never met before. So welcome to all of you. And I'm just going to briefly share the Warp website. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Warp, we are a textile network, an international textile networking organization. And this Zoom program, this is a monthly program that is just one of our many ways that we outreach internationally with the textile community. So if you're not familiar with Warp, I invite you to visit our website, weavearealpiece.org. And specifically, I wanted to share that under events, you will find upcoming events. So future panel discussions and some of our members only programs, they're all listed here. And if you are interested in watching recordings of any of our previous programs, you can find that here under previous events. So I wanted to share those resources with you. We also have a wonderful quarterly newsletter and monthly blog posts, which you can find under news. And if you're interested in learning more about Warp and potentially becoming a member, you can access that information here. And you're always welcome to email me with any questions at all. So I'll put my email address into the chat. So thank you all for being here today.
Okay, let's get started. We have a very special program for you here today, and it's all about the international, let's see, I better say it right. IFAM is the acronym, and we all say IFAM, but it's actually International Folk Art Market. There we go. Thanks, Kelsey. We had a Warp meeting in conjunction with IFAM several years ago, and I went to Santa Fe, which was really fascinating to participate in. And it's happens once a year. It's uniquely located in Santa Fe, and its basic mission is to create economic opportunities for artists all around the world and preserve the folk art traditions. And you see here in this statement what their values are. It's really about honoring cultural traditions, supporting the work of artists who are entrepreneurs, and also being a catalyst for social change. We want to tell you a little bit about, all right, so what is folk art? That's often the first question people have. It's rooted in tradition, expresses cultural identity, and the shared community values. It's utilitarian, whoops, there we go. Wide range of media, and if you go to IFAM, you'll see this and more, where it says cloth, wood, paper, clay, metal. So it's not just textiles, it's craft. And the artists themselves come to the market, and with the help sometimes of volunteers, often of volunteers, there's probably a couple of hundred, and Marilyn Murphy is going to tell us about that in a little while. But they sell their work. And also the folk artists learn traditional skills and techniques, so that's another component of what folk art really is. So we have three panelists for you today. We have Marianne Wise, who will be the first speaker, and her organization is Cultural Cloth. So you may know of her from that work, but I first met Marianne actually on the way home from another Warp meeting that we held in Iowa, and stopped by her fabulous store and saw the work of a nonprofit she helped form called Multicolores, which are rug hookers that use t-shirts, discarded garments to make fabulous rugs. So if you haven't heard of Cultural Cloth, I bet you've heard of Multicolores. So Marianne will talk a little bit about her experience with that. Marilyn Murphy, a longtime Warp member, is going to join us. She formed Cloth Roads a number of years ago, has been on the IFAM selection committee, and she's also been very involved with Andean textile arts. and has helped shepherd that organization through a number of years and probably a lot of ups and downs, right, Marilyn? So we're pleased to have both Marianne and Marilyn with us. And then our third speaker today is Marin Beck, whose business is Hill Tribe Art. And she's going to talk about her experience in bringing artisans to the market, the good as well as the challenging, so that those of you who are here today wanting to find out how to get artisans that you work with into the market or spread the word about it, this panel is the ultimate authority on all things IFAM. So we're very pleased to have you here. And I think we have a little video to share with you, just in case you haven't ever been. We'll give you a little bit of the IFAM experience. So make sure you're on full screen view for this and have your volume up because it's fun. It'll give you what it feels like to be at IFAM. Yikes. So is this the parade at the beginning, Marilyn?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's what I thought. Wow, fabulous. Makes you want to get up and dance, doesn't it? Oh, yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Marilyn Ramaka says the video takes her back, and she wrote an essay about her first time at the folk art market. So if you're interested in seeing that, she put a link in the chat. Thanks for sharing that. Terrific. Okay, so let's get started. First speaker is going to be, again, Marianne Wise from Cultural Cloth. She's a retailer of artisan work from many, many countries and has helped quite a few groups apply to IFAM successfully. It's quite a process, and she'll tell you a little bit about finding a good fit and how she's gone about doing that. And take it away, Marianne.
Good, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome, and let's just jump right in. My comments today are informed by my experiences as a buyer who attends IFAM, Scouting Products for Cultural Cloth, a company I co-founded selling mostly artisan-made home decor, and also by my experiences as co-founder of Multicolories, a group of Mayan women who make hooked rugs from recycled clothing and have participated in IFAM every year since 2014, notably within the market's innovation sector. And we'll show examples of their work in a few moments. Before launching into my remarks, first, know that the IFAM staff is kind, helpful, invested in your success. So if you are watching this video with the thought of applying for yourself or helping another group, do reach out to them. And second, if you are accepted to the market, savor this extraordinary opportunity. It is recognition and validation of your work. I highly recommend that you attend with an open mind and with an open heart to meet your global colleagues. I'm going to briefly touch upon practical aspects of preparing the application, and then I'm going to delve into the range of opportunities Multicolores has enjoyed as a result of participating in IFAM. Clearly, from the start, Multicolores benefited from our talented staff and others in possession of skills to help leverage the opportunities that came our way as a result of IFAM. So I'll start with the application. The process is rigorous. This year, there were 11 sections to be completed, and I urge you not to rush the process, to be as thoughtful as possible. After submitting our very first application in 2014, we immediately began to increase our production, even though we would not learn the application result for another 4 months. We wanted to be prepared with sufficient inventory just in case. Second is assembling your array of products. I recommend you bring a variety of products with a variety of price points. I've seen first-time participants present high-quality embroidery work, but everything looked the same colors, the same product, the same dimension, and they did not do well. Sadly, it was a wasted opportunity, and I have not seen them back at the market since. On the other hand, as a buyer for cultural cloth, it has truly been a privilege to witness the maturation process of certain artists, to recall how when we first started representing them, all they sold were scarves. And now they've begun to branch out into home decor, into clothing, or innovating and collaborating with other market artists. Shipping the works to the market. In an attempt to avoid a scenario where artist products are held up in customs or worse, the market requires that your goods arrive about 2 months in advance of the market opening. For first-time artists, this can feel a bit like a stretch, but when you get to the market, you will likely meet artists, some of whom who lost parts of their shipments, and you'll be glad of the market's forethought. Arriving in Santa Fe, the market does a great job of welcoming all artists, but especially first-time artists. Most artists are lodged in the same hotel, and there truly is a palpable sense of camaraderie and definitely opportunities to grow friendships and build networks. Many artists are long-term participants, and you would be wise to seek out these artists in particular. Maximizing opportunities at the market. And I think we can start with the slides here, Kelsey, please. Understand that a world of commerce comes to the market, and not just market goers attending to buy pieces at retail. Market attendees include museum curators, writers, critics, gallery owners, store owners, all over the world. As I travel the globe and meet represented by cultural cloth, I hear how the experience of participating in the market opened doors, and not just one door, how those doors keep opening. So I want to drill down a little bit here to help you understand the kinds of questions and opportunities that might arise during the market, to help you understand it's not just a retail market. This past market was Multicolores' 7th market. We attract new buyers every year, but we also attract repeat customers, which as a retailer is a mark of success. It means you've got a product that people want more of. Some of these buyers begin to follow our social media, and some of these curious buyers have then participated in our rug hooking tours to Guatemala. Proceeds from our rug hooking tours help support the organization. Having toured in Guatemala with us, these women invariably become our champions. One tour alum ended up joining our board of directors. Some tour alums host in-home trunk shows. Some tour alums live locally in Santa Fe and help us with setup and take down our booth. Other tour alums have traveled to the market from outside the region to serve as volunteers in our booth. They know our story. They make absolute great ambassadors and sellers. And still other market customers have become donors to Multicolores. Other opportunities that might arise at IFAM, I'm going to highlight 4 of them. 1, gallery owners are among attendees, and they may wish to talk to you about exhibitions. You will want to be able to respond to these opportunities because it means possible exposure in ways you simply cannot predict. And so be prepared to speak about your production timeframe. As a result of participating in the market, Multicolores has been invited to participate in numerous high-profile exhibitions and both public and private sector. In May of 21, we exhibited at the Kaslo Gallery in Washington, D.C. Now, the curator for U.S. embassies in D.C. saw the exhibition and purchased several rugs as wall art for the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City that is currently undergoing a major renovation. With rugs hanging as art in the U.S. Embassy, it's not at all unreasonable to anticipate more opportunities flowing from this association. And this is a perfect example of my earlier comment about how the doors can keep opening. 2, retailers like me attend this market seeking new products for their shops and may wish to speak with you about wholesale opportunities well after the market. There is no standard discount percentage for wholesale. As artists, you or advisors to artists, you must carefully consider what works for you and let the wholesale buyer determine if there are margins enough for their business. For example, some artists establish a minimum amount for the retailer to purchase and then might offer the retailer a discount 30, maybe 40% plus shipping. As a first-time participant in establishing these relationships, I offer just a reasonable cautionary note, such as asking for references, then follow up. Speak with your IFAM artist colleagues who have a history of working with that particular retail. Avoid being taken advantage of. 3, custom work. Custom work, as a result of IFAM participation, Multicolores has been approached to create custom pieces. Custom work is about fulfilling specific requirements that are outside your standard production, and therefore custom work can be priced at a substantially higher value. But it also requires more oversight and greater attention to detail. So I urge you to be very cautious and do not promise more than you can deliver. And finally, prepare simple materials. The information need not be exhaustive, but it should provide thoughtful information that encapsulates the artist's story in a succinct, compelling narrative with excellent product and artisan photos or 2. In other words, think of the printed material as information you are distributing to key persons as a way to help them remember you and to distinguish you from all the other contacts they will likely have made at the market. And I'm very happy to answer your questions during the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Marianne. That was terrific. And I'm glad you mentioned the Q&A. If you have questions specific to an individual presentation, by all means, type them in the chat. But what we'll do is go through each of the 3 presentations and then have a discussion with everyone together. So our next speaker is Marilyn Murphy. And in addition to all the things I told you about that she's done, I found a few more when I looked at her bio. She founded Chicago's Textile Arts Center, and she was president of Interweave Media. And in addition to being on the selection committee for International Folk Art Market, she's an advisor for Avenir Museum of Design and Merchandising, and is a mentor and advisor to many in the global textile community. So Marilyn, we're so glad to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me. So I get to do the behind the scenes from the folk art market perspective. Marianne gave you a wonderful overview from the artisan perspective. So just many people always ask, the background in terms of what's the, I'm going to share my screen here so you can see what this year. So the video you saw at the beginning was from the 2019 market. 2020 didn't happen, and then 2021 happened in a very different way. So the 2022 is actually the 18th annual market minus the COVID year. This year, there were approximately 11,000 guests with 164 folk artists from 49 countries with over $3 million in artist sales, 1,300 volunteers. I mean, that's a phenomenal number, and I'll speak to that at the end of my presentation in terms of the areas. But as Marianne had pointed out, that some of the artists who attend, on average, the market will say on average, based on the number of artists, that the artists will go home with $20,000. Now for that can represent, an entire year or beyond what they may make. Now there's, highs and lows to all of that. I heard that this last year, just a few weeks ago, one of the artisan groups made closer to $80,000. So you never know, it depends on the product and who's there buying. So I'm going to stop this share a second. So I'm actually going to go behind through the, as Marianne had pointed out, the rigorous application process. I'm being on the selection committee, and I'll speak primarily focused on what the selection committee does, but I'm going to take you live into the portal because there's so much available as you're thinking about applying for the market or your artisan group applying for the market. So much is available right now for you to be able to go and look at and assess whether this market is right for you or your artisan group. As you can see already, the critical dates that have started all the way back of March of this year, and then this is for 2023 market. So your deadline, if you're considering for the 2023 market, you have to have your submission in by September 1st. I'm not going to click through to the submission area because it'll take you into a different registration site, but I suggest that you do that if you're interested. But I'm just going to keep scrolling down specifically in this page so that you can see what's there. The selection and placement process will begin the end of October. Actually, will begin the beginning of October as applications start coming in and notifications will be going out. So you can see, it'll give you who attends the market, what their focus is, the mission, which Judy went through. And here is where you'll start getting into your application. So your application process, again, this is all online. Who's eligible to apply? Many new first-time artists will be very interested in knowing about what the market provides in terms of first-time participation. I suggest that you read through this area in particular. What types of folk art is considered? What is innovative folk art? And then it gets into the selection process, and I'll go through that in just a minute. Notification, helpful hints, and then if you're accepted into the market, preparing for the international travel and how much to bring. And Marianne talked a bit about that too, how to budget for it. And this is probably down here in terms of the booth fees and other costs. What artists overall who get accepted into the market, look at this, and certainly for the first-time participants, because the market does retain 10% for the first-timers, and then 20%, usually based, as you can see, it's based on a sliding scale depending upon how much money that you make. But if you're lower than 10%, if you're lower than $10,000, the market does retain 10% of the sales, and then it shifts beyond that. And then your standard booth fee of $600. So that's the first place where you go, and that's under for artists. So you can see on this drop down, this is all in the FAQ and important information. Then you can click through to the selection process and the opportunities, as Marianne had mentioned. There is a wholesale market when you get to that point, should you want to participate in that. That happens in Dallas before the folk art market in Santa Fe. And then the Mentor to Market, the education program, and I'll talk a bit about that at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop this share, but I did want you to see what's all here. And not only just what's here, there's also a tremendous amount of information on YouTube available. And okay, so now let me go into, get back to my PowerPoint a second. Okay, so the selection and placement committee guidelines. So the selection committee is the first committee who reviews all the applications that come in each year. And we never know how many we're going to get. It's a fairly diverse committee, and you can, again, on the website, you can see who is currently on the committee. And we're selected based on our level of knowledge in certain categories, as well as country specific. We may have 50 applications to review or more. Again, if I was looking at, Mexico pottery, I might have, 10 applications, or if I'm looking at Uzbekistan textiles, I may be looking at 40 applications. So we go through that process. We go through this is what we're looking at in terms of, I'm not sure why my screen is advancing. I apologize. This is what we consider using both a matrix and weighting categories in each of the areas. So we're looking at each application for cultural relevance, community relevance, and certainly IFAM relevance in terms of who is attending the market, the overall country or culture, and who certainly comes to buy at the market.
Can I ask a quick question, Marilyn?
Mhm.
Does a group or individual have to reapply every year? Or
Yes, they do.
okay.
Yes, good question. And even if you're accepted the year before and for some reason you're not able to make the market, like this year that happened to a number of artists who could not get visas due to their backup of visa review applications, and they did not come to market, they will have to apply again for next year's market. So I said that there was a two-part process. So after selection committee chooses the number, from our perspective, then it goes to the placement committee. So you can see that the placement committee may get up to 300 recommendations from selection committee. And then they have a fairly significant job to do next, because there's only about 150 booth spaces. So placement takes our recommendation and goes into the diverse aspects of, how does it work for the market overall? Is there enough within each of the categories to give the market a nice balance? Are there enough new artists and the overall appeal and freshness? I don't participate on the placement committee, nor do I attend those meetings, so I can't speak to their process in that regard. We just get to see the net result on that. There is one other aspect that happens at the market itself, and both selection and placement come together and form the standards committee. And the standards committee, after the market is set up, the standard committee takes each of the artist's application, and again, we're divided up into groups, and we go to each of the booths and check that the artist has brought the items or range of items that they've had in their application. And we check the pricing, we check the booth displays, what do they look good? Do they need to change anything? This can be particularly challenging if the artist themselves isn't able to be present and they have volunteers helping set up their booth who may or may not be familiar with the artist's work. But overall, we want to guarantee to keep the market at the most prestigious market in the world. And in order for that to happen, we have to make sure that the booths and the work are up to that par. So then the market opens and shopping begins. So a few last minute a few other things that the artists are able to attend before, especially the new artists. This is very focused on this, is the artist education program, also been known as Mentor to Market, and now is more of a hosting program. I've been on this committee since 2010, and now with everything available online, it really helps because now you can actually go in and see and get information on, in fact, like this entire webinar which is almost an hour long. You can watch to see everything from how do you price your goods? How do you create a wonderful booth display? How do you prepare yourself to travel? Who is the Santa Fe market buyer? So all of that right now, you can go and look at this information again in preparation for thinking about application to the market and what's available. Then at the market itself, the day before the market begins, there is a half-day conference for all the new folk artists who are arriving, and there's more training and information available at that time. I mentioned about the budgeting and costs already, and that's online. And lastly, you don't have to know folk art to volunteer. There's all these areas for market greeters, volunteers, ambiance, art, booth, artist partners, artist assistant, and the all-important water team who keeps us hydrated. And lastly, on my presentation, this screen has all the key people that you as a new applicant that you would be working with, and certainly for the market itself, the Nadia Hamid, who is the Artist Development and Social Impact Coordinator. She is the key person for the artists from beginning to end. So I'm going to stop my share, and I think that's the end of my portion.
Super. That was great, Marilyn. I felt like I had a real insider's tour there.
Oh, good.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. So our third speaker today is Marin Beck, who, in addition to being the co-founder of Hill Tribe Art, is also a member of the Weave a Real Peace Board. And that's where we got to know each other. I think it was at the Washington, D.C. Annual meeting where we met, Marin.
Yes, it was.
Yep. So that was quite the experience. That was really an
Yeah.
international time. Huh?
It was a great conference. Yes.
It was.
Excellent.
I'm looking forward to the in-person ones again, Kelsey, just in case you were wondering. Okay. So Marin is going to talk about her experience, and particularly as it relates to bringing artisans who don't speak English. So take it away, Marin, please.
Thank you. Thank you. My experiences are from working for 17 years with artisans in Laos and Vietnam, though at the time we went to IFAM, I'd only been working with them for about 10 years. And my husband's in my business, Above the Fray, traditional Hill Tribe art. Also, we had worked with them for many years in going directly to their homes and buying directly from the artisans in their villages. And so I'd gotten to know them culturally, personally, and we consider them very dear friends at this point. So what I want to talk about is a specific set of artisans from Laos. Let me do a quick share screen here. Talking about the specific set of artisans from Laos whom we help with their applications, booth setup, and who also visited our home in 2017, 18, and 19. And I'm speaking about our specific friends who had had no prior opportunity to do a show outside of their own country before, and for whom all the cultural and business experiences were new. And I want to make a note here: if the artisans with whom you work, or you artisans who are listening now, have had experience doing shows in the United States prior to applying to IFAM, you may not have had some of the same challenges that our artisans had, because you will know a little bit more about the American culture and the American buying culture here. So again, emphasize this is not everybody's artisan experience. Perhaps it was a harder experience than for most, but if you're going to work with artisans to bring them to IFAM, it's important to understand some of the challenges and solutions of participating in the IFAM experience, and anticipate some of the cultural conflicts that may be inherent in their visiting and selling in a different culture. Now, I need to say that they would not have been able to come if it were not for Linda Ligon, who is a publisher for our book about these artisans and who is the one who suggested they apply to IFAM in the first place. So think about the connections you have and people who might be able to help you understand how to get involved in IFAM. And it wouldn't have happened if they did not have us as a contact first, because Linda knew us, we knew them, and it's that network that enables the artisans to get there. So think about the artisans you know who are fabulous world-class artisans that you would like to see attend IFAM, and they're the ones to be able to help. It's a fabulous opportunity for the artisans to be able to come to IFAM. I mean, there's no comparison between IFAM and any other show that we've ever gone to. It's a chance to see America, to meet the foreign to them customers face to face. And here's Suksakon with one of her customers. You get to experience new cultures, learn that not all Americans are rich. See garbage pickup, recycling, huge grocery stores, different types of houses, trees being replanted after harvest, no rice fields, different geography and climate, and learning they can't help themselves to dinner rolls off the flight attendant's food service cart. That's the big story that they tell. Coming from a small remote area of Laos, they would not have seen any of this without the IFAM opportunity. Personally, they also got to visit our home, meet some of our friends. We got to put them up for a short week of visits to the mountains, first snow ever. They got to see snow, the coast, go shopping, and it was really good for our relationships with our artisan friends. So if you've got artisans with whom you work, this will make the bond even stronger. I highly recommend it if you've got that relationship going. So to the mechanics of the process. The application, as Marianne said earlier, is complicated. It is the most rigorous application that I've seen for getting into any show, but there's a good reason for it, as Marilyn described. Please note that IFAM has many more programs now available than when my husband and I first helped our artisan friends come. So what Marilyn showed you online from the IFAM website is going to be much more valuable than what we knew that we had access to at the time. And it's much easier if a sponsor or mentor completes that form. It is because it's, especially if you've got artisans who don't speak English, it's incomprehensible for them how to get in. Obtaining a visa. Our artisan friends went down to the capital, applied for a visa, spent a couple weeks trying to get it lined up, went in, they were asked one question, told no, and kicked out. Called us in tears. What do we do now? Well, a friend of ours said, I'll pay for them to go and apply for the visa again. So we got money for them to apply again. I coached them on how do you act like an American when you go to an American embassy, because in Laos, women are supposed to be demure and kind and gentle, and they had to be an American. And so I coached them on how to be one, how to be definite about, I've been invited, this is an honor, here's the paperwork, I'm going to go, I just need the visa. And on the second go round, they were able to get in. So that's going to take some coaching for people who have never been outside of their country before. And the two artisans and their translator who came, the two artisans had never been outside of Laos before, and they live in a small rural area. So this was an enormous process for them to just mentally get through, let alone the mechanics of the process. Costs. These have all been touched upon, but I'm going to do a quick rundown here. We had to teach them how to export from Laos, import into the US, including labeling requirements, customs forms, and tariffs. We were able to coach them through the process, and actually I did most of it myself in talking with them and getting it all done. The artisans, as I said, spoke no English, and they needed a translator to help them get on a plane and get here. They just had no idea how to do any of that. So bringing a translator was required. The first year was absolutely fabulous. IFAM sponsored them as first year artists, and they made money. They thought it was fabulous. They were surprised by things like credit card charges because none of them had credit cards, and they had no idea that you actually paid for the use of a credit card. So there were some basic business things that we don't even think about, but that are important to be able to share with the artisans. Second year, the sales percentage fee that IFAM charged was increased it scared them off. They were afraid they wouldn't be able to make it. So even though they were accepted, we ended up representing as volunteers representing their art in the market. The third year, one artisan chose to come, was accepted and attended with a translator. This time she paid for all of her own expenses. And here's something I want to make sure that people understand: the variety of expenses that are involved. It's not just IFAM expenses, which of course are there because they have so many volunteers and it's a huge organization to be able to make the market actually pull off. But it included all of the labeling, customs forms, getting their visas, the time they spent in the away from home, getting their visas. And it was up to several weeks to be able to do it each time for them. The extra expenses to attain adequate inventory to take there, booth fees, credit card fees, although IFAM negotiates a lower rate. It's a wonderful thing IFAM does there. Plane tickets, rental car, Airbnb, food, things they didn't pay for so much at home. So there's a big variety of expenses that they may not anticipate, especially if they've never traveled outside of their home. And this is a place where a mentor or sponsor is really important in being able to work with the artisan through that process so they're not caught unawares at the end. As Marianne mentioned, bring a variety of price points for your textiles. Oops, I'm supposed to be flipping pictures here and I keep forgetting to flip them. Our artisans had theirs ranging from $28 to over $1,000. So it's really good to have a variety. We had some customers thank the artisans for having some smaller pieces because they wanted to have a small sample of each artist's work, and some booths did not have that. And all of those costs are important in terms of figuring out how do you charge appropriately for the work that they have. And since we've been selling their products in the US, we kind of knew what the price points would be and coached them on how to do that to be able to cover all of their expenses. I've touched on language barriers, particularly given that very few people in the world speak Lao other than Lao people. So it wasn't possible to have a translator, which is why they had to bring their own. And one of the important things that we learned and didn't realize at the time was there are some cultural barriers sometimes based upon the artisans who are coming. And in this case, it was that in Lao, you never, ever, ever interrupt a presenter. You never talk when a presenter is talking. And so we had to coach the translator to actually translate the workshop, the wonderful workshops that were provided ahead of time. And she was it was very difficult for her to do so because everything she'd been trained had said, don't make a sound during a presentation. So one cultural thing to think about, there may be others that you know about. Booth setup, again, very important to have somebody who can help set up a booth. An example, again, a cultural example in this case, in Lao, people will stack up textiles miles high. And that's just how it's presented in the market. You go into the market, there's stacks of textiles. You just sort of pick and choose from among them. That's not how people buy in the US. You want to be able to see it displayed. You want to think you're getting something special, one of a kind, and that and so they needed a lot of work on training how to do that. How to interact with customers. They're used to, again, sitting in the market and people come to them and already know what the product is. At IFAM, it's very important that you interact with your customers. You converse with them, show things, how things are made. We had diet charts, other tools to be able to understand the particular materials that were there, but it was difficult without the language, and it's difficult coming from a different culture of how that work was done. Despite all this, despite the challenges that happened and all the work that was done, the experience of going to IFAM and the subsequent status from IFAM participation in their home made it worth it for them. Being part of the collection of some of the finest artisans in the world by being part of IFAM was astonishing for them. They got to also meet other Lao Americans and talk with them about what it was like to be in America as a Lao person. And that was incredibly eye-opening for them in that experience. The parade was a huge highlight, meaning being celebrated as artisans and individuals who were selected to attend IFAM was overwhelmingly positive and rewarding. And the dinners where the artisans were introduced to those who made the event possible, and dining in a white tablecloth environment with waiters was a huge treat. So I strongly encourage you to find a way to help the artisans you know apply, as it is an incredibly wonderful opportunity for them both personally and professionally. So that's the end of my presentation today.
Thank you so much, Maren. That was great. Okay, I've got one question in the chat to start us off on the Q&A. And if any of the rest of you have a question, please type it in there. And I'm going to ask in our audience, I know there are several of you who have been involved with IFAM, perhaps have even taken groups there before. So if we are short on questions, I would like to take a few moments just to have a couple of you share your stories if you'd like. So while I ask the first question, I'll give you the rest of you the opportunity to think of a story you might want to share. And this one is for Marilyn. Are applications from artisans who reside in the United States considered?
Yes, but generally they're going to be people who are traditionally from another country who are artisans. Say, for instance, there's an incredible artist, Gasali, who many of you know, Nigerian indigo, and he lives in New Mexico and has for a number of years. So he absolutely applies. This year, there were some, I believe they were Aboriginal artists from Australia who live here in the from New Zealand, who applied, and they live in Colorado. So you just have to fit within the requirements of what the market requests.
Very good. Marianne asked a question. She said an artisan friend in Uzbekistan just texted her wondering if IFAM had any plans to expand to other states. You want to take that one too, Marilyn?
Not at this time. As you can see, the level of volunteers that are required make it quite challenging to think about expanding. There was a test a number of years back to do some smaller markets in the United States, and there were some much smaller, but so much changed since COVID. So
yeah, truly right. Several people, by the way, if you aren't looking at the chat, have said how interesting the presentations have been. Somebody wants to go next year, and that makes me think of another question, probably for you, Marilyn, and maybe Marianne too. What would it take for someone to be a volunteer? If someone wants to attend, what's the opportunity?
Sign up, sign up, sign up.
And what do you get to do if you're a volunteer? Maybe that's, or have to do, I should say both.
Well, there isn't a have to. I mean, I put the list of what volunteer committees there are way beyond just working with artists. There's before market aspects, from doing signage to setting up the overall ambiance of the exhibit. So if you sign up to get on the IFAM newsletter, you'll start getting the mail when volunteer registration opens up. You can go in and select however many shifts you want, your day, your time. It's all available then. And it's usually a couple months. I may not recall this. It's usually a good couple months before the market begins.
All right, so if you want to go next year, think about volunteering. That would make it extra fun. I've got a question for Maren. Betsy Blosser says, I want to mention this because she says she has volunteered as an interpreter in 2 different years. So that's an interesting skill set to bring to the volunteering. But Betsy says that one of the artisans she works with this year was sponsored, meaning a group of people had contributed to the cost of her travel and shipping. It's for a brother and sister duo. Do you know if that's common? And it seems like sponsorship might help tremendously for artisans that want to go to the market but don't have the wherewithal to do it. Do you
It's
know
very
any
common.
examples of that, Marin or Marilyn?
I don't. Most of my experience, again, is with that one artisan, set of artisans in one region that I know of. And we did a little bit of that also in their third year that they came. But I think Marilyn or Marianne would be able to address that better than I can. Do you know if there are groups where people are sponsoring them separately outside of IFAM?
Absolutely. Well, yes, I mean, there are, and again, if you go to the website and you go to donate, there's quite a bit of opportunities right there that, to give you background on what those would be, from sponsoring a new artist to just doing general sponsorship for the market itself. Marian, right now I can't think of, I know there are some artists who come year after year who do have some ongoing sponsorships, but right now I can't, my brain's a little foggy in that regard.
Marianne, you want to unmute and jump in on this one? There you go.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so question, were there any COVID restrictions or requirements for participants this year?
This year, they asked people to mask if they wanted to, but it was not enforced. They did do time entry, which really helped the overall congestion of the market. In fact, we heard there was only one artist who came down, with COVID at market, which is pretty phenomenal that there was only one artist who did. And they isolated, so.
So Brenda Shears has written a story in the chat. Brenda, do you want to unmute yourself and share that out loud?
Yes, certainly. Let's see,
Brenda's volunteered since 2016, and she says she's done ambiance, artist assistant, and artist partners, and then she and her husband served as artist partners the last 2 years.
Yes, it was really a tremendous experience. Sorry, I'm not exactly ready for prime time here. We actually were as if we were the artist in the booth. So we had to learn a bit about the products, but for the Algerian rugs, we had served as artist assistants for 3 years for the artist and knew the inventory well. In fact, we were able to sell 69 rugs and $26,000.
Wow.
And he actually said that we now sold more than he's ever sold when we've been here. So maybe it was the two of us. Maybe it was people really wanting to support during COVID.
Fabulous.
It's really a great experience. It's a wonderful organization. They do a great job. There are some glitches here and there, but they get discussed and resolved for the next year. I think very highly of it. And
Wonderful.
This year there's a man who was not able to come for the last 3 years, but he did have inventory in the United States with a representative in Massachusetts who sells for him. So we were able to get his inventory, to do our own inventory on receipt and sell the jewelry. And we did quite well for him, better than last year when his representative was selling. So volunteers can make a real difference. And I encourage you all to get involved.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else have a story you want to share? Okay,
There was
then
a question that somebody had about, are there any pop-ups that happen around the market? And, we did a private pop-up at our home for the artisans who came to visit us after market. and they were able to do additional sales that way. And they were people who normally bought from us, not from the artisans themselves. So it was a great opportunity to meet the artisans. But the difficulty with that is trying to coordinate the timing, and IFAM tends to stand alone, and there aren't other markets usually immediately around them. And then the travel logistics are difficult too, but it's a great way to add in. It's just, it's hard to coordinate.
Yeah, and this year, the Center for Traditional Textiles of Cusco had a pop-up aftermarket at Living Threads in Santa Fe. They had one last year as well, but again, it has to be aftermarket. It can't be before market.
Good to know. All right. Well, I see the appointed time is passed by 5 minutes. So I think, oops, it looks like there's one new comment. Let's see what we've got. Love to market. She's just sharing how much she loves the experience and other ways that she can help carry it forward. So I think you've all convinced us that the market is a must see. If you haven't seen it, it's a must experience. And if you can jump in and be involved, you will make a difference in the lives of the artists and maybe even your own. So check into IFAM if you haven't had a chance to do it before. And on behalf of WARP, I want to thank everyone for attending and our panelists for presenting. And Kelsey, let me ask you to come back one more time. Who have we got on tap for next month?
I'm happy to share that. Next month, our panel discussion will be members of Acadian Brown Cotton, which is an organization that strives to document, preserve, and promote Louisiana's heirloom natural brown cotton. And that program will be on Saturday, August 20th.
Very good. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. I hope you stay cool today and have a great weekend. And see you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.